Alright, what up? It's Leonidas here in Andorra, which is a country I only found out about in the last month. I actually didn't even... I thought this country was actually in Africa, but it's in between Spain and France. It's a very tiny little kingdom. Literally, what you see behind me is most of the population, okay? They live mostly in this city. And Andorra is a very interesting place. Okay, it's pretty much a giant shopping mall with houses, and the houses are actually very fancy. I'll show you one of the buildings behind me. And to get up here, it took about 3 kilometers or more of walking, about 4 kilometers of walking up a really large hill. Okay, as you can see, everything is really tiny below me. I'll try to zoom in. Yeah. But the city itself is quite beautiful. It's very well developed, typical of a Western European city, where everything's high class, lots of shopping centers, and fairly safe. Okay, I presume this is a very safe city. You can walk around. I walk around very loosely with my camera, etc., etc. Anyways, this video is about the journey that I've had so far. I arrived in the Iberian Peninsula, which is Portugal and Spain and a little bit of Andorra, on June the 3rd. Okay, took a flight from Toronto for, I believe it was 14 hours, who cares, and arrived in Portugal in the city of Lisbon, pronounced in English. In every other language, it's pronounced Lisboa. Okay, so Lisboa is a beautiful city, the first of the many Romanesque style cities in the Iberian Peninsula. Wanted to go to Lisboa for a long time, wanted to actually go to Portugal for a long time, because it's one of those overlooked countries for whatever reason. Last year did a Kentucky tour and they completely avoided Portugal, and they actually avoid a lot of the in a lot of their tours, they actually don't even cover Portugal, okay? So Lisboa was a nice place. The first stop, you know, typical red houses, lots of old architecture, that typical cultural style of the 1500s to 1700s, okay? It's, you're probably better looking at photos of that place. Then there's a little city to the left of it called Belém, which had more museums and stuff. There's a nice marina, whatever, check it out. After Lisboa, we went up to, we meaning myself, went up to Porto, Portugal, so it's called Port in English. And in Port, that was a much more beautiful city than Lisboa, than Lisbon, because it just looked more, I don't know, Renaissance, or very archaic in the last 500 years, but at the same time very developed. Okay, so it had that very old school European look, like super old school Latin European look. Okay, not dramatic European, but very nice. Highly recommend checking out Porto. Check out both Lisbon and Porto. They're both beautiful cities, but definitely check out Porto. It's more beautiful in my opinion. Then from Porto, stayed there for 2 days. So Lisbon was 3 days, Porto was 2 days. In the 2 days that I was in Porto, I went up to the city of Guimarães, which is just a 1-hour train ride. Just a day ride on the train, and that was a nice city, good little walk around. Don't really remember much. You get to go up on a hill. There's a church all the way at the top of the hill that was built in the last 100 years, so it's nothing really special, but you get a nice view. And then from there I went to the city of Braga, so I took another bus from Guimarães over to Braga, which is about another hour or so. Checked out Braga, wasn't anything special either. It has that typical old city center in the middle with the city square. You walk around a little bit, and of course after Braga I returned to Porto. So from Porto, Portugal, went south, took about, I think it was 6 hours by train, 77 euros, which is about 85, maybe 90 US dollars, obviously more in Canadian. And took a train down to the city of Faro in Portugal, and literally only stayed there for the night. People recommended checking out the beaches of Albufeira, which is a little bit to the left of Faro. We're talking about the very, very southern region of Portugal. and literally didn't even go to the beaches because I've seen plenty of beaches from traveling. They're all the same. Nice sand, you know, nice sun, whatever. And from Faro, the next day in the morning, took a bus from Faro to the city of Seville in Spain. So we crossed the border from Portugal into Spain. In Latin, the Latin language, the city is pronounced Sevilla. Now Sevilla was a very beautiful city. Okay, while I was there, they had a really amazing palace. I forget the name of the palace, the Palace of España or something. This massive palace, really cool. And the reason I really want to go to Sevilla was to check it out because it looks like something out of Game of Thrones. So if you want to see something out of Game of Thrones, go to Sevilla. There's also a huge garden there, definitely worth checking out. Lots of old school style buildings, very royal old school style buildings. Definitely worth checking out Sevilla. From Sevilla, we went over to Malaga. Now Malaga has of course, the old school city center with the plaza in the middle and the old school buildings. And they have a marina, okay? Now the highlight of that place was having a photo taken from the top of the castle. So they have a castle on the hill that was built by the Moors, so the Muslims that came in the 9th century Common Era, or AD, after the death of Christ. And the castle itself was retaken, whatever, reconquered, etc., etc. But the castle itself has an amazing view of the city, and if you have a pretty good camera, you can take a sweet photo from there. Highly recommend it, especially at nighttime. The view actually reminds me of the view from Copacabana and Ipanema in Brazil, which is Rio de Janeiro. So it looks a lot like it if you don't look at the old city, but you specifically look at the marina itself from the castle. Okay, so from that city, I went over to Granada. So Granada was the city that was recommended to me if I didn't care to go to the beaches. So instead of going to the beaches, I went to Granada, which is more towards the southern center of Spain. And Granada, I believe, honestly, I have a hard time recollecting it. It was a nice city. I'm sure it was a beautiful city. Old school architecture. Yeah, I honestly have a hard time remembering it. It was a beautiful place, let's just say that, like a lot of Spanish cities, like a lot of European cities. And then from there we moved over to Madrid. So in Madrid I stayed 3 days, met a couple cool people, and walked around a lot. Okay, so Madrid is definitely a metropolis, but it's a metropolis not in the sense of a North American metropolis where you have giant skyscrapers everywhere. In fact, they only have maybe four notable skyscrapers, which is in the business center. And other than that, the city itself is very European-esque in the sense of it reminds me a lot of Paris. So the structures, the residential structures, are a maximum of about 6, 7, or 8 floors high, and they have that, beveled look with the gardens outside of them, the balconies, little balconies outside of them. And pretty much the whole city is almost like that. And of course they have the city center, and in the city center they have a lot of interesting things to see. The food in Madrid is great. The tourist food in Madrid is great. Otherwise the regular food is very expensive. But if you check out the tapas, and there's one restaurant called Museo de Jamón, which means the ham museum. You can order, if you order a drink, which is €1, you get food with it. So just order a drink and you get free food. Order a drink, get free food. One thing I didn't like about Madrid, of course, it's a busy city. So upon arriving during the daytime, it was just so full of people. Okay, it's getting a little bit cold, so hopefully we'll warm up from here. The city itself, very beautiful. The first day, went a little bit of exploring. They have, cool city. The following day, took a 1-hour tour bus to Toledo. All right, so I actually started panning around just to show you the cool views here. In Toledo, it was a old school, built on a hill, European style fortress that was first developed by the Romans. Then it was redeveloped. It was destroyed by the Visigoths, then it was redeveloped by the Moors, the Muslims, then it was reconquered by the Christians, and of course it now is just like a super touristy destination. My friend bought a necklace there. He got, you know, ripped off, but just so you know, it's a touristy destination and you're likely to spend more than you should. I found it kind of boring after the first 3 hours, but of course there's a lot of history. The Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews lived together in tandem for a little bit until the Christians purged every other religion. Typical of the time, you know, pretty much everybody was fighting back and forth. It was the thing to do, the cool thing to do. And then the following day in Madrid, okay, so we returned back to Madrid later that day, and the next day in Madrid went to the gardens. Now the gardens in Madrid are amazing. One of the best photos I have there is of the Alfonso Plaza. I have no idea what the name was, but it has a lake in the middle, and it has like people rowing boats in the lake, and in the background is this really amazing statue with Romanesque columns. Super cool. Probably one of the highlights of going to Madrid, other than seeing all the other amazing architecture, where they have lots of that. Definitely just one step down from the amazing architecture of Paris, but definitely, like, if you give Paris a 10 in terms of architecture, in terms of the old city of Paris, then I would give Madrid a 9.3. Just arbitrary numbers, but a 9.3. After Madrid, we had two options. It was easier to go to Zaragoza or Valencia, and of course I like my travels based on architecture, so I asked around and someone recommended Valencia for the architecture. So arrived in Valencia. Valencia is one of those very interesting cities. On Facebook I posted that it's a very, very livable city, in the sense that you have the old city center, which is the super touristy, tons of people, thousands of people literally there, and spent 2 days in Valencia. But when you step out of the old city center, which is super easy, it's relatively quick compared to the other cities, you start to notice that there's tons of apartments. It's very clean. The infrastructure is great, pretty much representative of most of the Iberian Peninsula thus far, from what I've noticed. And went to the Oceanographic Center, where they, of course, keep the sharks, the walruses, the penguins, the dolphins. They train them, and then of course they feed them, and then of course they house them, etc., etc. But Valencia, definitely a cool city. One of the highlights of Valencia was there was a Christian ceremony where everybody was chanting, and there were thousands of people in the city center, in the main square, chanting something, return to us. I think they were saying, Jesus, return to us. And it was kind of seeing how a lot of the new age mentality of, pretty much believe in yourself rather than believe in a higher power. It was cult-like. It was very cult-like. And the general demographic that I noticed of all these people was 45 and up. So it's interesting to note this, that the people that are still very much faithful are in the 45 and up demographic. I'm talking about the average. Of course, there was younger people, but the overall average of who was there, 45 and up. So generally, I think that as with many belief systems in the past, one of the belief systems that will be faded out in the next 50 years, perhaps. More and more. Or it continues, whatever. Anyways, my opinion. And from Valencia, we didn't go to Zaragoza. We went instead to Barcelona. So at this point, I was getting a little bit, after spending about 2.5 weeks, I think, already from traveling in the Iberian Peninsula, I was getting a little bit tired. So decided to hop over to Barcelona. Barcelona. And getting to Barcelona, the first thing that happened to me was I didn't pre-book a hostel. I didn't pre-book a hotel. Upon arriving, I noticed that all the hostels were $50 US, so 40 euros per night. And I thought to myself, what the hell? So I asked around, and apparently there was a music festival, an electronic festival that was happening. And unfortunately, I got screwed with that. So actually, let's see if we can start walking around. Yeah. So I got screwed with that. And still got the hostel, still paid 50 euros with it. Anyways, arrived to the hostel, And then, of course, take a little nap, take a little breather, because extensive walking from this whole trip, really extensive walking, and start walking around. I get to exploring Barcelona, of course, beautiful city, very interesting way of how they configure the roads, but nonetheless, one of the main things I saw was the Gaudi Museum, the La Familia Sagrada, I believe it's called. And from there we went over to the city center, and at this point it was nighttime. And in the city, there's like this one main street in the city where they had many young people just walking around. I guess it's their like main city, but there's tons of people anyways, whatever, Barcelona. And I see an erotic museum, okay? So I decided, okay, I enjoy reading history about whatever, so decided to go there. And upon entering, take plenty of photos, but then after about 20 minutes, my camera dies, the battery dies. And after the museum, started walking around the rest of Barcelona, and it's a beautiful city at nighttime. Walking around the marina, walking around there's a really huge garden there as well. I guess that's a common place for Roman style cities. They have a garden to check out. Let's go ahead and cross the street here. Yeah, and so anyways, walked around, but for another 3-4 hours, or another 2 hours or so, and then I decided it was time to go to sleep because couldn't really use the camera, battery was dead. Saw enough of what I could in Barcelona, so went to the metro. And in the metro, they're having service disruptions because the metro people are on strike. So unfortunately, had to walk another 4 kilometers to my hostel and then pass out. And in the morning, there was these 2 drunk fellas, and one of them had their alarm set for 8 a.m. And of course, instead of turning off their alarm, they would just continuously put it to snooze. So every 15 minutes, it kept going off. So after the 3rd time, I got up and turned off this fella's phone. Nonetheless, we are now, after traveling in 4 cities in, where are we? In the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, after traveling to 4 cities in the Iberian Peninsula. Or in Portugal, I mean. And I believe another, 6 or 7 cities in Spain. We are now in Andorra. As I said, the city itself is very much like a big shopping mall. Okay, I think a lot of people come here perhaps because this stuff is cheaper. Not really sure. The streets themselves are very busy. It's surprising. It's like a downtown core of a city, but it's a very small place too. Maybe the population is about 80,000. And after here, we'll move up into France and then into Eastern Europe. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that video. That was the first long ass video with this new camera I have, and I will see you in the next video. I have some really cool topics to talk about. I would love to share with you in the next video. Salute, Leo, Andorra, Spain, Portugal. Next video. Cheers.